Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, serving with the 352nd Artillery Regiment, started his day on the Normandy shoreline in much the same routine fashion. A light, moist fog lingered above the English Channel, cloaking everything in a subdued haze of gray. The atmosphere carried a chill, laced with the usual tang of brine and sodden soil. It was shortly past 5 a.m., just another shift, another stretch of tense vigilance. Yet, peering through his binoculars as the earliest traces of daylight pierced the skyline, Richter noticed a shift on the water. This was no mere ebb or flow of waves, nor was it some passing storm system. What emerged defied belief. A shadowy streak had formed along the line where ocean blended with the heavens, a blur that steadily expanded, clarified, and replicated itself. This went beyond a simple armada. It resembled an ironclad urban sprawl, an aquatic empire emerging from the obscurity and etching itself into the annals of time. In that instant, prior to any Allied troops touching the sands beneath, before terms like Omaha or Utah had entered global awareness, Richter grasped the truth. The Reich faced imminent submersion. To grasp the jolt of that dawn, one must delve into the perspective shaping Fortress Europe during the spring of 1944. Spanning from Norway's shores to the frontier with Spain, German builders had erected the Atlantic Wall. Designed as a network of fortified concrete and metal, armed to the teeth with weaponry, it stood as an unbreachable shield, warding off potential assaults. Within the calculations of German leadership and the rhetoric disseminated to the troops, it symbolized the unbreakable might of the Reich. However, Oberleutnant Richter, a seasoned military man and survivor of the Eastern Front, recognized the chasm between such boasts and the actual state of affairs. At the age of 32, he retained memories of a prior era in Germany, while having been forged in the intense crucible of conflict. He possessed a practical mindset, keen awareness, and profound exhaustion. Leading an artillery unit equipped with reliable, well-inspected cannons, housed in fortified concrete positions several miles back from the shores that the Allies would later designate as Omaha Beach, he oversaw operations from a sturdy observation bunker embedded in an elevated cliffside. This vantage point offered him a sweeping panorama of the ocean. Routinely, he and his soldiers practiced their routines, computing trajectories for their shots, caring for their weaponry, and gazing endlessly at the monotonous, overcast waves. Conversations inevitably circled back to the impending assault, the fateful D-Day, the ultimate reckoning. Yet uncertainty lingered. Precisely when would it strike? And crucially, from which direction? Reports from German spies firmly predicted the primary thrust at Pas de Calais, the narrowest stretch over the Channel, making it the sensible target. There, the 15th Army, representing Germany's primary might in the Western theater, stood poised for battle. In contrast, Normandy appeared merely peripheral, perhaps a feint or distraction, but hardly the central thrust. Such a grave tactical error was far from coincidental. It stemmed directly from the Allies' ingenious ruse known as Operation Fortitude, which rendered the Normandy garrison perilously vulnerable. Although Richter's outfit, the 352nd Infantry Division, outshone many local units in quality, it paled in comparison to the crack troops that had overrun France back in 1940. Composed of battle-hardened survivors from the Eastern Front, much like Richter himself, alongside a majority of inexperienced adolescent draftees and aging militia members, The division's ranks brimmed with courage and loyalty, yet they fell short of the blitzkrieg vanguard from 4 years prior. As guardians rather than aggressors, they bore the burden of securing a front that extended perilously wide. Even the much-vaunted Atlantic Wall resembled a haphazard assembly more than an impenetrable barrier. Numerous pillboxes remained unfinished. Mine barriers featured vulnerabilities, and the expansive terrain allowed formidable positions to be cut off and circumvented with relative ease. Richter was well aware of these vulnerabilities. He had observed the paths that nearby farmers continued to take, along with the gaps in the defensive firing zones. Professionally, he doubted the fortification's ability to withstand a resolute enemy attack. As June approached, the atmosphere of unease felt almost palpable. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, charged with bolstering the coastal protections, moved with relentless energy. He directed the deployment of millions of mines and thousands of sharp metal barriers across the shorelines. Soldiers nicknamed those barriers Rommel's asparagus. Rommel grasped a critical reality that Berlin's top leaders appeared to overlook. Should the Allies not be repelled right there on the beaches within the initial day, the conflict in Western Europe would be doomed. Superior Allied aviation would devastate any German forces attempting to reach the front lines. Only the initial day held true significance. Yet, by June 5th, conditions shifted dramatically. Fierce gales arrived, accompanied by turbulent waves. Officials at the German Meteorological Office boldly declared that any assault would remain unfeasible for several days ahead. This assurance prompted numerous high-ranking commanders to ease their vigilance. It explained Rommel's absence from France altogether. He had traveled back to Germany to celebrate his spouse's birthday. The tempest seemed to guarantee their security. Thus, as Richter maintained his vigil amid the early morning frost on June 6th, the atmosphere felt utterly ordinary. Though the gale had subsided, the ocean remained restless and uneven. Nobody anticipated any disturbance. Gazing toward the east, he caught the initial glimpse, a mere glimmer. He lifted his high-powered Zeiss binoculars and peered intently. His pulse, which had pulsed steadily during the quiet hours of sentry duty, now pounded fiercely within his chest. That glimmer revealed itself as something far greater. Vessels, not mere scouts or skirmishers, but hundreds in number, with countless more trailing in their wake. He scanned the horizon from side to side with his lenses. In every direction, the sight persisted. The waters, once a dull expanse of slate, had transformed into an unbroken expanse of shadowy, threatening forms. A chilling fear ascended along his back. It resembled the sensation of confronting an equation utterly beyond one's grasp. For an extended instant, Richter struggled to comprehend the scene. The immense magnitude defied all reason. Reports from German intelligence had projected that the Allies could assemble perhaps 3,000 ships for such an operation, a feat that alone would demand extraordinary resources. But the spectacle before him transcended that entirely. Attempting to tally them proved pointless. Instinctively, his mind started to classify what he observed. He discerned the massive outlines of battleships and cruisers looming large. Fleets of nimbler, swifter destroyers darted around them like packs of predators. And beyond those, the vast multitude defied numbering. Landing vessels in every conceivable form clustered so tightly they resembled metallic particles pulled irresistibly to a lodestone. He shut his eyes briefly, massaged them, and then gazed once more. The sight remained unaltered. It simply sharpened with the gradual rise of the dawn. In time, the precise tally for the whole endeavor would be established at close to 7,000 ships, a formidable fleet drawn from 8 nations. It stands as the greatest amphibious assault assembly ever assembled. Yet for Richter, this was no mere figure. It manifested as a tangible force that appeared to warp the very edge of the sea. It stood as a testament to manufacturing might so vast that it rendered all prior concepts of combat irrelevant. The Germans had erected a barrier of cement. In counterpoint, the Allies had forged a span of metal. Seizing the battlefield phone, his palm dampened by perspiration, he spoke into it. "Richter here, from lookout position 4. I can see the strait clearly. Ships are visible." The reply from the line sounded weary and offhand. "We've received word of several vessels, Lieutenant. Likely just a skirmish attempt. Hold position." "No." Richter's tone grew tense and insistent. "That's not it. You aren't grasping the scale. It's far more than several ships." The sight stretched out endlessly. Thousands upon thousands of vessels blanketing the water completely, visible from one edge of the sky to the other. This was the moment. The assault was underway. A moment of silence followed, laced with incredulity. Richter could practically sense the officer on the line dismissing him as an overwrought young subordinate, unnerved by mere illusions. "Oberleutnant, the conditions at sea aren't right for that," came the response. "Our intelligence indicates—" "Your intelligence is mistaken," Richter bellowed, his tone breaking with strain. "I'm witnessing it myself, right here. In heaven's name, just glance at the ocean." In a surge of exasperation, he crashed the receiver back into place. The scale of it all defied comprehension. Undeterred, he dialed a different connection to reach regimental command and connected with his superior. "This is Richter, sir. The invading armada has arrived. 10,000 vessels strong." Deep down, he realized he was inflating the count, yet at that instant it seemed woefully inadequate. Skepticism colored the major's reply. "Richter, are you absolutely sure? The skies are so pristine you could spot the apocalypse itself." "Major, and that's exactly what's anchored in the English Channel, awaiting orders to commence a bombardment." On this call, the desperation finally pierced the doubt. Yet the hierarchy remained frozen, crippled by an inability to envision the unthinkable. Every strategy, chart, and briefing they relied on dissolved in the face of the undeniable truth bobbing just offshore. As Richter kept his gaze fixed on the armada, the top brass fixated instead on scattered accounts of airborne troops dropping farther inland, convinced those were the true centerpiece of the operation. Eyes turned away from the ocean's expanse. Richter refused to hesitate for his crew. He bellowed commands to his soldiers. Stirred by the sudden uproar, they gazed outward from their stations, expressions blending wonder with dread. They beheld the same sight that had captured him. Practice maneuvers had concluded. Reality had arrived. Ammunition crates yielded their massive projectiles. Spotters announced distances that appeared staggeringly vast. The enormous gun tubes, quiet for ages, rose gradually, their muzzles trained on the unbelievable armada. From his station, Richter remained rooted, field glasses glued to his face. He spotted the assault boats assembling into formation. He sensed the tremor through the atmosphere, a deep rumble from countless motors. It echoed like the respiration of a mighty nation, and he stood ready to launch the initial strike. The directive arrived at last, moments shy of 6 in the morning. Richter seized the initiative without hesitation. For him, it marked a cathartic unleashing. The grip of stunned inaction shattered, giving way to the sharp focus of decisive movement. "Fire!" he bellowed into the phone. Seconds passed, and the earth shuddered beneath the initial barrage from the artillery, followed by a pair of subsequent blasts. Projectiles whistled across the waves. Through his field glasses, Richter followed their path, a blend of expert satisfaction and underlying fear coursing through him. Geysers of spray burst amid the armada, near misses, one after another. His crew proved skilled. They fine-tuned their targeting, unleashing volleys in a steady cadence, and momentarily they struck true. Richter witnessed a solid strike on the American destroyer USS Corey. An explosion of fiery hue erupted, accompanied by a cloud of dark fumes. Although certain reports propose the vessel might have encountered a mine as well, in Richter's eyes, his battery had inflicted the initial damage as the craft tilted heavily, disabled, and eventually went under. A triumphant shout rose from his team. For a short while, the scene evoked an authentic clash of arms. It seemed their drills had real purpose, yet that sensation proved short-lived. For once, the Corey took the hit. The naval group showed no signs of dispersal. It pressed onward, undeterred. The void left in their ranks was promptly closed. The ceaseless procession of vessels advanced relentlessly, a metallic surge impervious to hindrance. His cannons thundered repeatedly, yet against every craft they might trouble, dozens more glided by unscathed. A deep wave of pointlessness enveloped Richter. He resembled someone armed with a pail, attempting to drain the sea. Beyond the craters from his own ordnance, he perceived the broader scene. The Allied capital ships, including behemoths such as the USS Texas, were now swiveling their enormous 14-inch cannons landward. The response arrived soon after. It began with a distant growl echoing over the waves. He caught glimpses of illumination from the massive vessels, resembling a muted electrical display along the distant skyline. Moments afterward, the atmosphere near him seemed to shatter violently. The terrain started to buck and surge. Columns of soil burst upward from the surrounding farmland. The methodical, factory-like effort to break down the Atlantic Wall was now underway. What about the German counteraction? Where were the tanks? Where was the Air Force? Richter searched the heavens and spotted only aircraft from the Allies. Interceptors, heavy bombers, supply carriers. They dominated the airspace without challenge. According to German strategy, the plan involved swift assaults by armored forces, yet the nearest such group, the 21st Panzer Division, remained stalled amid disarray and the requirement for explicit instructions from Hitler's command center. Once it eventually advanced, it proceeded devoid of aerial protection beneath a canopy swarming with Allied pursuit bombers, and it suffered devastating losses long before arriving at the battle line. It was right then, amid the roar of his own artillery and the descent of metal from above, that Richter grasped the truth. This was no contest. It was a slaughter. The Allies had no intention of flanking him cleverly. Their aim was to obliterate him entirely. That one stark insight into superior power shaped the whole of the Normandy operation. The tale of how manufacturing superiority overshadowed combat maneuvers is intricate and captivating. if these explorations of history's overlooked viewpoints intrigue you. The video's producers encourage viewers to subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. As the barrage from the sea grew fiercer, a profound change overtook Richter's thoughts. The strategic calculations in his head ceased entirely. In their place emerged an icy, chilling insight. Ships and troops faded from his view. Instead, he perceived the vast machinery supporting them. He envisioned the industrial plants at the heart of it all. Peering through his shaking binoculars, he gazed beyond the naval vessels and conjured images of Detroit's bustling production lines. He imagined facilities generating trucks and motors in quantities that Germany could scarcely aspire to match. The sheer coordination of the assault, the capacity to sustain vast armies on enemy coastline, held no element of wonder. It stemmed directly from that immense manufacturing prowess. Turning his eyes upward, he beheld the heavens crowded with a ceaseless flow of C-47 cargo aircraft and escort fighters. During D-Day, the Luftwaffe managed roughly 300 missions across the whole of France. The Allies, by comparison, launched more than 14,000. Each German aircraft aloft faced over 40 from the opposing side. This disparity arose not from any lack of resolve among German pilots. It arose from the factories themselves. Then came the matter of armored vehicles. Richter was well aware of the formidable standing of German panzers. The Tiger and Panther models held clear technological edges, instilling dread in Allied tank operators. Yet such advantages led nowhere in the broader campaign. These machines proved intricate, costly, and challenging to manufacture. Whenever a single intimidating Tiger emerged from production, the Allies churned forth scores of more straightforward yet devastatingly reliable Sherman tanks. Across the full span of 1944, just the United States would manufacture more than 29,000 tanks. In stark opposition, Germany's highest monthly output never exceeded 2,000. The Allies had no intention of prevailing in armored clashes by means of refinement. Their strategy centered on overwhelming the panzers beneath an avalanche of metal. Such was the harsh truth now unfolding. This represented the brutal arithmetic of downfall. The lofty rhetoric surrounding resolve and doctrinal fervor melted away when confronted with these stark figures. The Nazi creed had assured that a cohesive, resolute nation might prevail against crumbling liberal states. Yet this stood as irrefutable evidence. No doctrine could halt an incoming aircraft. No sheer determination could dispatch a warship. A deep, nearly transcendent hopelessness gripped Richter. He and his troops were capable fighters. Their impending deaths stemmed not from being bested in battle, but from being overwhelmed by forces so vast as to challenge the imagination. They found themselves entangled in a struggle long since decided. Richter himself, along with his unit and the whole Wehrmacht presence across the Western Front, resembled an exquisite blade pitted against a massive mechanized press. The result of this clash had always been predetermined. His mind drifted to the rallying images of the posters and the fervent conviction at home that ultimate success was assured. The entire conflict had been built on deception, not merely a deception of politics, but one rooted in cold arithmetic. The German leadership at the top surely recognized it. They would have examined the manufacturing records. Still, they dispatched him along with millions more to wage a battle that victory could never crown. Little surprise, then, that during the conflict's dying months, the mental toll and the stark realization of this futile reality sparked a surge in self-inflicted deaths among frontline commanders. These men weren't merely clashing with troops from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. They contended against the vast, unchecked might of the world's manufacturing juggernaut. With the dawn light intensifying, abstraction gave way to savage fact. The barrage from the sea built to a furious peak, an unending barrage of thunder that echoed without pause. The bunker's reinforced walls trembled, fine particles cascading from above. Peering out the narrow viewport, Richter witnessed the initial assault boats striking the coastline. The Higgins vessels lowered their fronts, unleashing U.S. infantrymen into the foaming waves. Nestled in the fortified positions dotting Omaha Beach, German machine guns erupted in bursts, shredding the advancing pioneers. From his elevated position, Richter observed the grim spectacle play out. The sea staining crimson, corpses accumulating in heaps. The Wehrmacht's 352nd Infantry Division inflicted a devastating toll. Briefly, it appeared the line might endure. The invaders found themselves immobilized, yet once more the calculus of production tipped the scales. Spotting the carnage below, Allied destroyers executed a daring, near-fatal maneuver of valor. They surged right up to the water's edge, several venturing as close as 1,000 yards, while grazing underwater obstacles. Pivoting their artillery toward the enemy strongholds, they unleashed point-blank barrages that ultimately shifted the momentum at Omaha. Simultaneously, unusual mechanical contraptions started emerging on the scene. From his vantage point, Richter observed amphibious trucks known as DUKWs emerging straight from the sea and rolling right up to the shoreline. He witnessed tanks advancing steadily from the water, with certain ones fitted with massive rotating chains designed to trigger explosives. These innovative designs were the so-called Hobart's Funnies, custom-engineered British armored units, crafted specifically to breach obstacles of this nature. The opposing German forces possessed no equivalents. What had been a chaotic clash on the shoreline beneath him evolved into an organized campaign of devastation. Allied firepower, ranging from ship-based barrages and armored vehicle projectiles to aerial explosives, methodically neutralized and obliterated fortified German positions. Just on Omaha Beach, projections indicate that the 352nd Division endured approximately 200 losses over the course of that single day, an immense proportion of its combat personnel eliminated within mere hours. Richter's artillery unit had become a key objective. Explosive rounds were impacting nearer with each volley. A precise strike on a nearby emplacement erupted in a massive burst of flames. Yet another cannon fell silent, rendered inoperable. His communication lines had fallen silent. He found himself cut off from all support. The chain of command lay in ruins. With a final glance toward the heavens, he beheld an endless procession of Allied planes overhead, like a shifting canopy blotting out the world. Out on the water, the initial assault boats gave way to successive waves, the second following hard upon the first, then the third pressing forward. Farther out, an immense fleet hovered in readiness, functioning as an unending supply chain, delivering troops and equipment without apparent limit. On that pivotal day alone, the Allies would deploy approximately 1,500 tanks onto the shores. Though the struggle for the coastline continued fiercely, its result was already sealed. Victory hinged solely on endurance and overwhelming resources. The campaign across Normandy would endure for 2 additional months. The clashes amid the bocage would prove savage and devastating in lives lost, yet they altered the inevitable course not one bit. Each German armored vehicle knocked out represented an irrecoverable blow. For every Allied tank sacrificed, 3 others swiftly took its place. The death of each German infantryman created a void in the defenses that no reinforcements could mend. To Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, and to the myriad German troops who endured beyond that initial onslaught, the remaining conflict served merely as a drawn-out aftermath. They pressed ahead in battle, propelled by obligation, terror, or a sense of national loyalty severed from any true foundation. Yet the prospect of triumph had evaporated. It dissolved amid the first rays of sunlight on June 6th. We commonly envision the downfall of the Third Reich as a protracted, torturous disintegration, reaching its climax in the siege of Berlin. However, for those stationed along the Atlantic Wall, the conclusion arrived abruptly, in one shattering instant of clarity. This was the instant when they confronted an armada stretching to the edges of sight, a firmament darkened by hostile aircraft, and an adversary that transcended mere military might. It embodied the relentless, pulverizing power of contemporary industrial might. Such warfare marked a profound shift, waged not through the valor of combatants, but via the ceaseless output of distant manufacturing plants. And for that one German commander, scanning the ocean through his field glasses, where it had transformed into an impenetrable expanse of warships, it became the dawn when certainty struck. The end had arrived.